Michigan bans coconut oil in cannabis vapes. Growing evidence suggests that the oil may pose health risks when vaporized or aerosolized in the lungs. This is a story that was originally reported in Crain's Detroit, written by Dustin Walsh. The Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency is moving to ban a potentially dangerous oil from the state's cannabis industry. On October 1st, the agency will require testing for medium-chain triglycerides, or MCT oil, on all inhalation products such as vape pens, after growing evidence suggests that the oil may pose health risks when vaporized or aerosolized into the lungs. MCT oil is commonly made from coconut oil and to a lesser extent from palm kernel oil, both of which are approved for consumption by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. But what this article doesn't mention is it's approved for ingestion, for eating, not for vaporizing into your lungs, right? It's a completely different mode of administration. But new research shows that smoking oils, oh, God, sounds terrible, right? Have adverse effects on lung function, like vitamin E acetate, as previously used as a diluting agent in the industry prior to the state banning it in 2019. From public health and safety standpoint, the potential for adverse effects with MCT oil underscores the importance of adherence to safety guidelines in product development, said CRA Executive Director Brian Hanna in a statement. Companies participating in Michigan's cannabis industry must prioritize respiratory safety when formulating or using inhalable products, opting for ingredients that have been thoroughly evaluated for their compatibility with lung health. I look forward to when our state new reference laboratory is up and running, advancing the health and safety of Michigan for Michigan cannabis consumers with advanced testing of things like the diluents that are used in vape pens. Michigan follows other cannabis states like Colorado in banning the use of MCT in distillates for vapes and other inhalable products. Jonathan Kane, the chief science officer of Lansing-based processor Lion Labs, says competitors use MCT oil in their distillate to increase their margins by lowering the amount of distillate, which created by dissolving expensively grown cannabis. I don't know about that, but producers who use MCT oil in their products are essentially creating more oil by combining a non-cannabis additive to the distillate, which drives their overall cost down, resulting in greater profit. Well, isn't that surprising that the motivation for shady operations in the cannabis industry is to increase one's profit? To move from a state regulatory body comes from amid growing concerns raised by one of the state's cannabis testing labs, Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs in Ann Arbor. Josh Sviter, we've talked about Josh before, CEO of the California-based company, has been making noise in the industry for a few months, alleging many in the state's top vape pen makers were using MCT to thin or dilute their cannabis oil to boost profit margins. Studies shows that you should not be inhaling MCT oils, Sviter told Crain's. It's a public safety issue. As a scientist, I came into this industry because I believe in cannabis and public safety, which is why I'm here. Safety testing facilities in Michigan work for the public, not the brands, because they are the gatekeepers to the safety of the public. We have been working on this project for 2 years and no one has taken action. I truly think the public has the right to know what they're putting into their bodies. Under the rules set forth by the CRA, cannabis companies are required to list the ingredients, including MCT oil, on their packaging, but most did not. Zweider's company tested more than 120 vape pens that were purchased off store shelves by 3 different organizations in the industry to determine whether some of the best-selling products contain MCT oil. Those organizations, 2 of which are operators in the industry, are asked not to be named. Infinity Chemical ran the tests of the products and reported to Cranes earlier in the month. Of the 14 samples tested from Mount Morris-based Skylabs performed by Infinity, 2 of them test positive for MCT oil. Denise Policella, attorney for Skylabs, insists that Skylabs did not know their products contained MCT oil because the processor does not cultivate cannabis, but buys distillate for vape brand Bossy and from other cultivators. What I can tell you is that Skylabs does not produce its own oil, so the distillate containing MCT was not produced at Skylabs. It was sourced from elsewhere, Policella wrote in an email to Cranes. I am honestly much less concerned about products manufactured in a licensed regulated facility than I am about all out-of-state hemp-derived CBD and THCA crap. In the article, that is on party store and gas station shelves right now. That stuff is full of pesticides and who knows what else, and is not regulated or tested in any way. Skylab has been on the outs with the state since regulators before. In July of last year, the CRA issued a recall of Skylab's Flight brand vapes for failing compliance testing and potentially using illicit market product. In lab testing, Skylab recalled cartridges. Concentrates were determined to contain a chemical residue of several banned substances, including an insecticide, bifenthrin, and the fungicide myclobutanil, more commonly known as Eagle 20. Skylabs isn't alone. Several other processors failed MCT oil testing performed by Infinity Labs, including Chicago-based, publicly traded, multi-state operator Cresco Labs, really, West Bloomfield-based PureX, MKX Oil Company, Michigan Investments, 10 Muhammeds, and a handful of other smaller brands. None of the other operators responded to Crane's inquiry about the use of MCT oil. Some of the operators were among the top-selling vape brands in the state. So get that? The top-selling vape brands in the state have MCT oil in it. Crazy, right? Some of the operators are amongst the, like I said, the top-selling, according to Headset. MKX Oil, for example, sold nearly $14.7 million worth of vape pens in 2024. Holy shit, that's the current year. They've already sold over $14 million of these vape pens in this year. This is crazy, right? And Muhammad's has sold nearly $8 million worth of vapes also already this year. Aussie's only sold $1.6 million. So my God, I mean, again, these vapes typically retail between like $60 to $80 for a vape, for like a half-gram vape. So you can do the math and look to see how many vape pens they sold. It's a lot. The number's large. But those vape brands are well below the state average of the $18.25 per vape cartridge. Oh, I guess their cartridges are a lot cheaper in Michigan. I don't know. Cartridges here in Vermont are much more expensive. Skylab's Bossy brand sells for $7.44 a cart. So the reason why they can sell these carts so damn cheap is because they're cutting their oil with MCT, which is super cheap. When you see a gram vape pen for $6, those vapes tend to show up in more testing for MCT than other ones. So again, that's the ugly story from Michigan, is that people are cutting their vape pens with MCT oil. And let me just, so MCT stands for medium chain triglycerides. It's made in a fractionation process from coconut oil. And how many of you cook? I'm sure everybody cooks, right? So you ever put oil into a pan, right, and you heat it up, you'll notice two things. You'll notice, first of all, the oil doesn't boil like water, right? You don't boil oil, right? The molecules are just too big. They're too big to basically boil and vaporize. Like water is this little molecule. These medium chain triglycerides are big molecules. I just knocked over my water cup. So what happens is they don't boil, they smoke, right? So when oil reaches a smoke point, that's the temperature at which, at that concentration of oxygen in the air, the oil undergoes what's called thermooxidative degradation, right? So when you're firing a vape pen and you have MCT oil in there, you're not boiling the MCT, you're basically degrading it. So if you put coconut oil, again, into a fry pan and you start heating it up, you'll see when that oil reaches its smoke point, the oil is going to start to smoke, because the oil is reacting with the oxygen in air, and it's making very noxious compounds called aldehydes and acids. And these aldehydes and acids aren't things that you want to breathe into your lungs. Number of years ago, there was a scare about lipoid pneumonia, which is what happens when you breathe in too much paraffin. And typically this is an exposure issue for folks who work at like Yankee Candle. Like if you're working in a facility where there's a lot of aerosolized paraffins, you could end up breathing a lot of that fatty material into your lungs, and that's when you suffer from lipoid pneumonia. You will not get lipoid pneumonia from sucking on an MCT vape pen, because the vape pen is not hot enough to basically aerosolize all of that. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be degrading the MCT, and you're going to be basically inhaling degradation products, which aren't good anyway. So the notion of lipoid pneumonia, probably not the issue, but certainly MCT should not be put into vape pens. People were putting MCT into vape pens because they needed a way to keep CBD from crystalline. CBD is a crystalline solid. You have to dissolve it to put it into the cartridge of the vape pen. So they were using things like vitamin E acetate, right, or MCT oil. Those are not good. The vape pen is supposed to mimic when you smoke cannabis. And when you smoke cannabis, the hots on the end of the joint is heating up and decarboxylating the cannabinoids. And as you draw air through the joint, you're basically drawing vaporized cannabinoids and terpenes into your lungs. You're trying to reproduce that in a vape pen. So while it's okay to basically breathe in the terpenes and breathe in the cannabinoids that are in cannabis, it's in a particular ratio. You can't just start adding all kinds of terpenes in there, because now your terpene ratio to cannabinoids is going to be way unbalanced. So the best vape pen is made by a real cannabis extract with no additives. If you have to put additives into your cannabis extract to turn it into a vape pen, find a better way of extracting. You have to extract it to make an oil that's actually a liquid, and there's ways of doing that we won't go into today on the High at 9 News, but needless to say, don't be putting vape or MCT oil into vape pens, because it's not good. And that's my story today, and love to hear what you guys have to say.
Man, so no more coconut oil in vapes. How many other states do we know that ban coconut oil in?
Colorado.
Colorado. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Do you see this happening in more states? Do you think this is going to spread to other states too, Dr. Mark?
Well, I think, yeah, I think it would be really good if there would be sort of like some process standardization. So if you extract cannabis, right, if you extract dried cannabis that you would put in your bowl and you extract it, the extract typically comes out like what we used to call shatter, right? Because the principal ingredient in cannabis is THCA, not THC, but THCA. THCA is a crystalline solid. When you extract out all the other minor components from cannabis, it turns it into what's called an amorphous solid. An amorphous solid is typically what we would call shatter or pull and snap kind of, kinds of extracts. Now, if you were to extract the same weed, extract it as fresh frozen. Remember, fresh frozen weed is going to have a much higher terpene content, right? And that higher terpene content is going to result in now a liquid extract. So when you do what's called a fresh frozen run or make live resin, typically, when you use the same weed that's dried, when I say dried, that means stems will snap. That means you could put it in your bowl and smoke it. That is going to give a shatter, but the fresh frozen version of that, because there's so much more terpenes in there, is now going to give what we call a sauce, right? And the sauce is going to be that THCA, but now it's going to be dissolved in all of the terpenes that are fugitive during the drying process. So when you dry cannabis, when you take it from its fresh form to its dried form, you lose a lot of terpenes. Because you're not losing those terpenes in freshly frozen cannabis, now that extract is going to be ready to go into a vape pen. And that vape pen is going to taste just like the cannabis from which it was derived, because you're taking a native extract without adding artificial terps, without adding any diluents, and you're taking that extract and putting it right into the cartridge. That's how vape pen should be made. That vape pen will be, again, very tasty, will taste just like the cannabis from which it's derived, right? But because there's so much THC distillate that's out on the market, and THC distillate has been stripped of its terpenes and its essence and its flavor, now there's a market for what do we do with that distillate? Well, let's put that distillate, reincorporate some cannabis terpenes, make it taste like cannabis a little bit, and oh yeah, let's dilute it so we turn 5 kilograms into 10 kilograms so we can make $50 billion as opposed to only 25 billion, right? So there's a lot of motivations for people to dilute the most expensive ingredient, because we're in the cannabis market, commoditization is happening, and it's a race to the bottom. The lowest producer will win. The lowest cost producer will win. So there's all kinds of pressures for people to lower their production costs. You lower your production costs by putting in some cheap filler like MCT.
You know what, Rico? Go ahead, Dr. T, please.
I was going to say, great explanation, Mark. I just wanted to add that, they're chasing the additives. I mean, they're going to make MCT oil illegal, and then the operators are going to find another oil to put in there. So the regulators don't get it. They just have to say, if you're going to make a vape cart, you can't add anything to it, period. You just have to add whatever extract you get from the pen.
Right. There are hemp farmers now, Dr. T, who are basically growing hemp for the terpene content, harvesting the terpenes in a steam distillation, and then plowing the rest of the biomass back into the field. So they're like, the hell with the cannabinoids. We want the terpenes and we want the flavors. So those terpenes and those flavors are now available to then add to vanilla distillate. So distillate, THC distillate, has no flavor whatsoever. Ideally, it has no flavor. Some of it actually tastes pretty boofy. But now terpenes that are native to cannabis can be added to a THC distillate, and you can dilute those and make vape pens out of them. But I think the best vape pen tastes like the cannabis from which it was derived, and should have the natural complement of not just the terpenes. And we learned last week that it's not all about terpenes. There's these other tropical sulfur-containing compounds and other things that the guys at Abstracts are finding. So those are going to be in the proper proportions in a cannabis extract. A live resin extract is kind of like a photographic picture of the cannabinoid and terpene profile at harvest. And you want to basically translate that into your vape pen cartridge, because now that vape pen cartridge is going to be strain specific. It's going to have the terpenes that were in that cannabis and not some other cannabis grown in some other state. So, yeah.
So one quick question for you two doctors while we're on this is, this sounds like a similar reason that they're banning this is a similar reason why they, like why you would ban vitamin E at the same time. Is this like a close relation to a similar reason?
Well, yeah, actually vitamin E acetate led to the Valley crisis. So vitamin E acetate is like, it doesn't get absorbed. It causes all kinds of issues. If you understand how delicate your alveoli and the interface between your lungs that delivers oxygen into your blood, it oxygenates your blood. Guess what? You don't have oxygen in your blood, you're dead. So you're basically inhaling these molecules and messing up that interface that oxygenates our blood. And I don't know, Dr. T, that just seems like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, they all cause inflammation, but vitamin E acetate clogs up your lungs more than MCT oil, but MCT clogs it up a bit too, and they all do. Smoking that causes inflammation, or inhaling, oils causes inflammation. It's just, we don't have proof that it doesn't work or it causes problems except for the vitamin E acetate. We don't have great proof on MCT oil. They're sort of saying, well, MCT oil too. And then it's like, well, what other oil are you going to ban? Are you going to ban the cannabinoids? It's like, they just have to find a construct.
I don't know if you've seen this, Dr. T, but people have talked about using cannabis in vaporizers, right? First of all, vaporizers, it's water-based, right? You ever try cleaning your bong out with water? It doesn't work too well, right? So in order for you to put cannabinoids into water, you're going to need surfactants and emulsifiers. So now you're adding surfactants and emulsifier. Oh my God. Having emulsification happening in your lungs or breathing surfactants into your lungs, just not a good idea. Not a good idea at all. Just smoke weed or smoke live resin pens, right? That's basically what the moral of the story is.
So I guess
live resin is okay. Live resin is what's coming off of the cannabis plant when you smoke it, right? You're getting that burst of terpenes and decarboxylated cannabinoids. So if you're trying to reproduce that in a vape pen, the only thing that's appropriate to go into the cartridge is a live resin extract. Period.
So Rico, I guess if you were going to create a vape line using MCT oil for the trap market, you could you could just do a OT Genesis collab and call it "You've Got to Cut It."
You got to cut it. You got to cut it. Yes. Shout out to OT Genesis, man.
Yes.